Let's unpack the week's market movements now with Robert Towell, Senior Portfolio Manager at Sasfin Securities. Good evening, Rob. Thank you for joining us. The Rand surprised us this week by recovering its strength somewhat against the US dollar. What do you make of this, and what can we expect in next week?
Well, I think 10% that it's recovered over the last week or two. Today, unfortunately, it couldn't hold all of its gains, and while it was below 18 to the dollar earlier in the morning, it's now gone back above 18. But a good performance from the Rand. Generally, it's a weaker dollar, as we saw the CPI numbers come in the United States, and you see that CPI inflation coming down. You started to see people expecting that the Fed might not increase interest rates in the US so much, and you started to see a dollar come off and weaken, and you saw the strength come into the Rand. Next week is the Fed's meeting, and we'll see how much they raise the rates. We expect in 0.25. If they did more, or if they were hawkish, you'd see probably a very weak Rand into that. And if they decided to pause, you'll see the Rand continuing to strengthen. So I think next week at the Fed's meeting will really give us direction of where the Rand's going to go from about this 18 Rand level.
Absa has become the latest bank to warn about more credit impairments, or plainly speaking, people not being able to repay their loans. With the good inflation data from the US you just mentioned and a possible pause on rate hikes there, could we hope for similar good news from our Reserve Bank later this month?
It's possible. The South African economy is slightly different to the US, and we really do need lower rates to try and get some growth in the economy. Our economy is under immense pressure. But at the same time, we do need to keep the Rand slightly firmer to stop imported inflation. So in a difficult position for the South African Reserve Bank to be in. If they did pause in the US, I think that we would follow and pause as well. But I think that if they did raise by 0.25, we've probably got one more raise as well in South Africa. And then we'll see from there onwards, depending on the data, whether we'll get further increases. But I don't think the South African Reserve Bank would keep rates stagnant if the US increased their rates next week.
Now let's take a look at the price of Brent crude. There has been some supply cuts this week, disruptions this week. What could be the impact been further down the line with our fuel prices? At this morning's, it was about $81. It's now sitting just above $80.
Yeah, so off its highs. Generally, there still is not that much demand worldwide for oil in general, so there's not too much a demand pool. But as supply comes off and OPEC starts to continue to decrease the amount of oil available, if you saw a big recovery in China, so far the recovery in China has been muted. If you saw a large recovery in China and you started to see some type of recovery in world markets, that would put pressure on oil. But at this stage, I don't think oil is going to be too much of a problem until we start to see real demand in the world economy. So for now, I don't think it's going to create too much inflation on the South African point at this stage.
Rob, lastly, Unilever was a big talking point this week. They paid millions in fines because of anti-competitive behavior. Not everyone feels the Competition Commission's investigations are good for investment in the long term. What's your take on this?
Well, this goes back to about 2004 to about 2013. It looks like it was manipulating the price of margarine to suppliers. I think if there is collusion on pricing, the Competitions Board should get involved. I think really where people don't want the Competitions Board involved is, where you've got a very big competitor, and if they get bigger, it's actually beneficial for the economy as a whole. And then they stop them from growing, and they say no, they're not allowed to be that big, and they need more competing people in the system. And then they stop investment, and therefore much smaller players in the market can't do what the larger players can do, and therefore the market is actually not as strong as it should be. And in that case, the Competition Board does, slow down investment because people don't want to put large amounts of funds in. But where it comes to pricing and people manipulating pricing, then the Competition Board should definitely step in.
Robert, just before I let you go, the biggest winners and losers this week, just off the top of your head, on the markets.
Well, I think we saw the banks recover quite nicely. We saw Absa's numbers come out, even though some of the numbers on the bad debts were slightly higher. Good numbers there, so I think some money coming back into banking. And I think you saw some money coming back into commodities again this week. So I'd say the commodities were the big winner this week.
Thank you so much for your time, Robert. That was Robert Towell, Senior Portfolio Manager at Sasfin Securities.